All right, as we reflect on the country's democracy this Freedom Day, most South Africans are still reeling from the shock of the court's failure to grant constitutional damages to Michael Komape's family. Legal advocacy group Section 27 had put forward a 3 million rand compensation claim on behalf of the family. The 5-year-old Komape died after falling in a pit toilet at his school in Limpopo back in 2015. To discuss this further, we now joined by Oza, Deputy Director at the Center for Child Law, and she joins us this morning live from our studios in Pretoria. Oskarabo, good morning to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yeah, at Section 27 as it is, I think we had them in studio earlier this week. They looking into appealing the decision. But for you as Center for Child Law, what was your first reaction when you heard about the outcomes of this court case?
So I think we do support the fact that Section 27 is going to appeal it, the judgment that is, because as a start, the judge gave the structural interdict, let me call it that, and obviously then declined to grant constitutional damages. The structured interdict is very welcome because it's a process that will allow the court to monitor government in terms of doing away with the pit latrines, and they will have to report back, and Section 27 will have to represent the Komapes to monitor the government in that process. So insofar as that is concerned, and the fact that that process is going to protect the rights of other children, that is very welcome, and I think there was enough before the court to show the failures of the Department of Education to support such a court order. But we are disappointed as well in relation to the constitutional damages.
Yeah, because I really think there are two sides to the story, as you have just said, that of course some people are of the view that the money, that 3 million rand, would rather be used to correct the situation and save the lives of other children in the rural areas. But South Africans, they were really having debates regarding this, saying that it looks like judiciary's empathy and sympathy was not shown in this particular case. The family has gone through so much after the death of their son, and more so because of the way he died. Do you feel that empathy was applied in this court decision?
Look, I think it's very difficult to just rely on empathy in a legal context. So let me take it from a legal perspective and quickly explain. If tomorrow the person who is my breadwinner dies, I can claim quite a bit of money because I relied on them, they were an adult, they have earning capacity. But when it comes to a child, the child is not working, the child doesn't have earning capacity. So the whole point of constitutional damages was to try and say that we need to do more about the life of a child. It's not enough to just have funeral expenses being paid for. You need to acknowledge that there are constitutional rights of children that have been violated. This particular child died. Building new toilets will not benefit him. His family has lost him. They had hopes and dreams that were attached to him. And I think that is what's missing from the judgment. When I read it, I feel like, so the judge describes how he died and how his family found him, and then it leads to the family wanting money for it, for pain and suffering and emotional shock and all those things. But I don't then read something that reminds us of who Michael was and what happened to Michael. And fine, he was 5 years old, but we don't know what he meant for his family. And I think that is why there was an attempt to get constitutional damages, because children are the most vulnerable members of our society, and when they lose lives, actually they're the people that we can claim the least for. So that, in a way, may weaken your protection of children, because know that the life of a child is not worth much. So it's within that context that we must understand the attempt to get constitutional damages, and the fact that in the judgment, I do feel that the judge did not really, I think, apart from the family, but highlight again, these rights that this particular child who died had, and the fact that so many people failed him, starting from government way back by not doing away with the toilets, the people who on that day were supposed to help look after him, So we sort of, that doesn't come across from the judgment, and that is really disappointing.
Yeah, you've just preempted my next question to you, Oskarabo, because as we celebrating Freedom Day today, looking into the democracy and our constitution, let's just reflect on the violation of Michael's rights as a child, of course, as I said, who happens to be a child to his parents.
Yes, so I think the starting point is the fact that our constitution guarantees children so many rights. Our constitution is beautiful. If you go everywhere in the world, we're told how we have very strong provisions in our law in relation to children. But the reality is that on the ground, we are failing. We are failing to realize them. And I think people must understand that in as much as we're saying the Department of Education can use money to do other things, they failed Michael. By the time the court got involved, it was because of years and years of failure of protecting his right to have sanitation in a safe school environment. And that is there actually in the judgment that there were monies that were sent back from the Department of Education of Limpopo back to Treasury. Instead of using that money to do away with these pit latrines, money was sent back. So those are the things we need to interrogate in relation to how are we protecting our children? Are we just lax? Do we always have to wait for the courts to tell us what we must do? It is very disappointing because it has to start with the government understanding a child and imagining a child constitutionally and saying, you know what, for the country to have a future and for these children to have a better future, we have to start by providing for them today. We don't need the court to always be telling us what to do. But because we're failing, the courts end up having to tell us, and sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't do so well. And we need to develop the constitution. The constitution must become a living document that we use to change the real life situations of people. It shouldn't just be beautiful words in a document.
It's got to be implemented indeed. And some people, of course, saying this is a blow for the children still living in your deepest rural areas where there are pit latrines. We have to leave it at that. Oskarabo, thank you so much for coming through and enjoy your Freedom Day.
Thank you, you too.
Karabo Oza, Deputy Director at the Center for Child Law, talking to us about this Michael Komape case, of course, linking it to Freedom Day as the country is celebrating Freedom Day today. All right, we're taking a quick ad break.